Welcome, everyone. I'm hoping to make this a conversation between Weiwei and I, but then between all of us, among all of us. And I just want to explain to begin with that I have my notes on my BlackBerry, so don't think I'm sitting here checking my email as I moderate the talk. So like many great artists, Weiwei is a man whose biography has turned into something of a mythology and gotten out in front of him, serving as a shield for what he actually thinks and does. Anyone who knows him knows that he was born in 1957 in Beijing, knows that his father, the great poet I Ching, was domestically exiled a year later, knows that he grew up in Chinese Turkestan in a little town called Stone River. They know that he returned to Beijing as the Maoist era began to thaw, that he then left for the United States shortly thereafter. You might know about the evenings he spent in the 1980s with Allen Ginsberg, about the day he watched David Hammond sell snowballs in front of Cooper Union, the night shift he used to work at a newspaper press, the weekends in Atlantic City he spent as a professional blackjack player. You probably know about the day in 1993 when he decided once and for all to return to China, and about the years that followed, the several years that followed, split between his dying father's bedside, the antiques market of an emerging new capital after 1989, and the artist hovels of a reemergent art scene in the early and mid-90s. And if you don't know about any of that, then you surely know about his last decade, the decade since he drew himself a house on a napkin, built it in a village in what was then the far outskirts of the city and what has now become a gallery district. And since he started harnessing the energies of carpenters and potters and lighting technicians to create works of stirring, poignant simplicity. You know that he was the idea man behind the Bird's Nest Stadium, a role that he inhabited at the request of his friends Herzog and Demirhan. You know about the 1001 Chinese people he brought to Kassel for Documented 12 in 2007. And if you read Newsweek or the New York Times in the last 2 weeks or so, you certainly know about his increasing radicalism as a writer and activist. I feel quite lucky to have watched the radicalization of Ai Weiwei, we might say, in the last years since we met, I think, exactly 7 years ago in Guangzhou. And I hope that today we can draw him out on some of the moments along this path before an art world audience that is certainly eager to hear how all the different facets of his life and work connect. And so I wanted to start with one piece that really struck me. I mean, in his recent show at the Haus der Kunst in Munich, there's a piece. The show is titled "So Sorry," and there's a piece, Weiwei, in the show that says, I think, a lot about your current thinking, aesthetic and political, and it's called "Soft Ground." Do you want to talk a little bit about this massive carpet that you made?
Hello, and thank you for sitting there under such a strong sunshine. And and actually, after Phil's talk, I feel the conversation is finished. So we don't have much to talk about. And about the piece in Munich show, and which is still on now until the January 17th, I had a work which is covers. It's a carpet designed for this museum. We all know the museum had a very strong historical background. So for any artist to have a show there would think of to do a work which can have some connections or reflects on the piece of history which I had. And also that history, ironically, still reflects today's China's condition. We are still living in a totalitarian society. And so I did a work called a soft ground, which is a tapestry, is a rock, and exactly about 400 square meters, large size, and the pattern design on the surfaces exactly reflects the ground under there, all those tiles and the scratches and the stains. So, but of course, you only can imagine it. You cannot really check on it. So That's the piece Phil refers to.
I mean, I think it's an interesting piece because it sort of talks about, I think, the way you see a lot of what's happening in China right now, how certain realities are obscured, and we're given a surface that we're supposed to believe, but we don't. I don't know.
I think the most important character of the certain political conditions, such as the situation in China now, is to really cover up all the facts and the truth, not to release it, not to, or to release it in very fragmental or partial conditions. So people will never really have the truth, and that's how it maintains the control, and it can manipulate. So yes, it does relate to the political condition I'm in now.
I mean, the other thing I wanted to draw you out on is a strand in your art recently, or kind of all along, where you're taking existing capacities, craftsmen who have certain skills, or in this case, like the Beijing carpet factory that makes carpets for buildings all over the country, and sort of pushing them in different directions.
Yes, to work in China, not only for me, it's really a question how to use this old machine, which relates to the history, and also relates to the longer history and the present conditions. So I often use craftsmen which can deal with that matter.
You once said something to me about this belief of yours that a work of art is not just it doesn't just have an aesthetic presence or a conceptual presence, but there's actually a moral dimension to your art making.
I think all ethical aesthetics and it relates to ethical and moral conditions, and it's part of it, and we can never really escape that.
Which does that maybe tie into? I think a lot of people, especially recently, are asking kind of where is the line between your art making and your activism? Are these for you separate things?
Actually, myself, I don't separate it, but I often hear people talk about it. What is the art? What is this so-called activist? I think art is activist, and you can it just have to dealing with the condition, and to have to reflect the situation you are in, and to give your answers or your impressions on those things. So for me, it's not a choice. It's a real condition there, and I just have to be honest about it.
Is Chinese society your ready-made?
I think yes. I think the society and the so-called traditions and the culture conditions, not only in China but in the global sense, and it's a ready-made. It's we as an artist, you have to always to have the ability to really look at it and think at it in your own perspective.
Let's talk about Twitter. When did you start using it? This morning, you were up at 4 a.m. writing updates about things that were happening all the way back in China. And it seems like this has become a big part of what you're doing lately.
In recent years, I myself are very much fascinated by the internet, and I spend each day from 6 hours to 16 hours on internet. So all my office feel very strange. This guy, he people think he's an artist, but he's really just twittering. there. And I think this is really a unique situation, especially for China. We don't have any channel to really for individual to express themselves. So Twitter become so people who knows me because they read my Twitter, and I want to talk to them because they can read my Twitter. So I have over 10,000, 100,000 readers would read my response to my my mind, and with which I think is so fascinating, and it is, and but it's still going to be a strong force for civil movement and for the political change. So since we don't have a democracy, we don't have the rights to vote, we don't have a media which can express individuals or feelings. So everything is under censorship. So the Twitter become a miracle for us. And this morning, of course, because we are still doing some videos and filming work, and one of my assistants went to Shanghai, was taken by the police. So the second he was taken, he sent a message to me. I put on the Twitter, so the whole world know it. So 10 hours later, they released him. So I think that's the only way. Otherwise, they can lock him up for days, or or even make him disappear for months. So because that's the only way we can to let the power know everybody's watching, and we're all discussing it. So that's a miracle for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what you've done in the last couple of years, starting with the blog and then now this more sort of microblog kind of activism, it says a lot about how control works in a society where there is an element of censorship, but there's also this free flow of information that can't really be stopped. I mean, it was very curious when you had your run-in with the police, and just a little bit of background. You were in Sichuan in August, right, to testify in the trial of a friend of yours, a friend you'd never met. All based on this investigation that you put together using your blog.
Yes. Well, we did the investigation on the internet about the deaths of Sichuan earthquake. All those young students dead, amount of them, 5,000 of them. So the government never gave a right number and nor the names. So we decided to do it ourselves. So after maybe almost 8 months, we already found all the names, and who are they, and how old are they, and which school and class they belongs to, and what's their parents' name and telephone numbers. So we posted on the internet, which made the government very nervous, because they just don't want anybody to know the details of how those people get killed. So, but they lock up a local activist, a writer, who is also have made the same effort. So they accuse him for overthrowing the government, or a temptation to overthrowing the government. So in the courts, I don't know him, but his lawyer asked me if I can testify for him. I said yes. Our evidence and proof can explain why he's not guilty. So I went there, of course, 3 o'clock in the morning. About a few dozen of police running up our hotel room and kicked down the door, and we had an argument, and they beat me. It's not it's common situation. Police just use some violence in, when they try to do their job.
And you were filming the whole time.
We are filming the trip, and of course, when the police was in the room, my cameraman didn't turn on the camera, and because it was so scary. It's like a Hollywood movie, so it's this kind of drug ride or something. So drug rate. So I asked them later. I said, why don't you turn on the camera? He said, well, it's too dangerous. If I turn on, they will take the camera and they will ruin the tapes. I said, well, if you don't turn on, they already ruined the camera. It's not the camera has no function. So that part, I was smart enough to turn on the recording. So we had the voice recording, which is clearly recorded the situation. So later, next week, when we back to Beijing, we already cut the film and edited it, and it becomes the most beautiful and popular film in the internet about this event. But at the same time, I use my camera on my mobile phone to Twitter. So the moment the event happened, all the photos is already on the internet. And when later I realized all those images are used by a lot of mainstream medias.
And so this film was distributed almost entirely on the internet.
Yes, that's.
It was really striking. I think it said a lot about kind of how images move now, China here or there, that the actual incident where you sustained this wound was viewable, downloadable, and then a few months later, there's more of the story to fill in here, but you went to Munich and you were having a headache and you were sent immediately.
Yeah, months later, I had this headache with me when I was in Munich and went to hospital. The doctor said, well, if you come later, you will never see your own show. This is the end of it. So they did the operation, and I'm alive and I still can sitting here, but I just disappeared a few months ago. Because this head injury. I had this cup full of blood in my brain, and the brain distorted totally. And after they release the pressure, and I'm become alive again.
And you were taking photos of that the whole time?
Yes, but I didn't remember it actually. When I come out, they give me this newspaper of, this southern Munich newspaper, and
the Süddeutsche Zeitung, right?
It's on the front page. I said, who did this photo? They said, you did it yourself. You tweeted before you lost conscious. It was not good photo, but if I have a conscience, I wouldn't do that.
So then you Twittered a photo of yourself holding the newspaper with the photos that you Twittered before.
Yes, I Twitter everything.
And then a few days later, you got out of your hospital bed and went to install this massive show at the Haus der Kunst.
Yes, we spent about a month to work on the installation. It's a really huge exhibition. It takes about 16 40-feet containers. The containers like that size. It takes 16 of them to I think it's really crazy.
It's a whole art positions. But what's interesting here is that I think you could argue that you fall in a tradition of modern Chinese intellectuals, maybe going all the way back to the early 20th century, to the May 4th movement, who have been concerned about the state and the fate of the nation, of China's future. I particularly remember an afternoon in 2005 when we were talking about the kids who work in your architectural studio, or who were working then in your architectural studio, and there was this craze in Beijing for these kind of knockoff Vespas that sold for like 2,000 RMB. Those little tiny scooters, the very like Italian style. But they sold for 2,000 RMB, which is like 200 euro. And it was this real moment for me because I think a lot of times when we talk about this sort of thing in the West, about China's productivity or economic rise, it's always framed in these terms of kind of how cheaply things can be done, how it undermines the American worker, and all this sort of thing. And your response was so intuitive but so opposed. You thought right off that actually the situation was that China was enslaved to global markets, that it made absolutely no sense you could do something this cheaply, and you could only do something this cheaply when you had a significant portion of the population that was actually almost in a slavery kind of situation to production. I don't know, like yesterday again we were talking about the situation in Dongguan or in how this economy really works.
Yes, and these little facts in southern town, a city near Guangzhou. Each year there's 40,000 fingers are chopped off because they're doing those, just simple works. And each year China have 300,000 accident. In the production factories, cause the death is 300,000 people. So that make everything is cheap in the West. It's not. It has cost, and somebody has to bear with it. Their life have to bear with that.
Is life worth less in China?
Well, you can tell from the mentality of China, the Chinese government. When there's a death, they only give the numbers. The numbers can have thousands or 10,000s difference each time they give. Nobody would really questioning who are they, what's their name, and what's it like. Before they had the problem, so it happens every day.
Which is a bit like the piece you made with the backpacks in Munich.
Yeah, and after the earthquake, I went to the area. You see all those students backpack throwing everywhere, and people even don't want to pick it up because all those owners, all those young students are under the concrete and all those bricks. So that's why I was thinking to work to relate my work to these conditions.
I mean, for maybe some people don't realize the connection between the collapsed schools and the system. This idea of the Dofujia Gongchang.
Well, if the building are built properly, the death toll of the earthquake would be maybe only 5% of what's happening in the earthquake, which caused 100,000 people disappeared. And nobody's talking about it. It's no artists, no architects, no state officials talking about it. People think because it's earthquake, everything's normal. It's a part of the deal. But which is not true. It's you see buildings all surround all schools are still standing. Only the classrooms are collapsed, and even under that condition, the government refused to give investigations, and because they had this policy to build all those schools in a very fast fashion in just one year. To meet some kind of policy, every student can have a school, but of course the way they build it is really we call it tofu construction, which
tofu dregs construction.
Yeah, which means it doesn't meet any kind of construction regulations, and it was still cause injuries because the whole China, the school are built in same condition as at that time. So that's why they refuse to admit the truth, because there's too many there, and students still working and studying in those kind of conditions. Can we talk about art?
But everybody wants to hear about politics. Do you regret dropping the Han Dynasty urn?
What?
It's broken now.
Yeah.
Is that a key piece for you?
Well, it's not. That's not a real art. I mean, it's just an incident. It happened. And,
But it's a piece that people sort of know you by at this point. This idea of taking the priceless artifact, the irreplaceable artifact, and destroying it as a way of creating your art.
well, that's why I'm trying to do something more. Try to change the image of my image in people's mind. I think I can do much more complicated works, and to prove I'm a capable artist.
I think people believe that already. But I mean, here's one. I think a very interesting piece of yours was in 2002 for the Guangzhou Triennial, when you made this first chandelier, this 9-meter high chandelier. And it was almost like the chandelier was already made, right? You were using the same company that was making the chandeliers for various government and commercial buildings, the sort of hand assembly of the piece, and then hanging it outside the museum inside a scaffold. And it was more of a statement in a way. It was, in other words, what happened later is you kind of became known as an artist who made chandeliers, right? So if we go to the Fontainebleau, we see your chandeliers hanging in the lobby. Are we supposed to understand them as objects or as statements?
Well, first, as a statement, I hate chandeliers, but it's a strange, you become part of what you hate. And this Mary there, she convinced me to do another chandelier in her gallery. When I had a show in her gallery, she said, well, you have to do one, So I did the chandelier falling on the ground, and she loved it.
I mean, I think a lot of these kinds of tensions come out in your ceramic works, too. If you go into your studio in Beijing now, you'd see a mound of sunflower seeds. It's almost as tall as this, like halfway as tall as this screen, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And are they machine-made, or are they?
No, they all, we have a huge population, and the place I make ceramics, it's an old factory. Actually, the factory is as large as Miami. They have traditions for hundreds of years to produce porcelains for the emperors and also for the household. So, and I always fascinated how those traditions and also those craftsmen disappeared in the modern condition. It only become decorative, and it become flower pots and stuff. So how to transform this unique and very beautiful craftsmanship into contemporary language? So that's I did several works relate to that, and those works are complicated. Requires a lot of people. The sunflower seeds requires 80 people worked over a year. Now they're still in, each day they're still accumulating and produce some more. Each of them are hand sculpted and fired, then hand painted again, and individually, and then fired again. So
How many have you made so far?
it's about 10 million of it. And it's crazy. It's you make something which is not exactly has any meaning. Of course, people think you can sell it, but still, it doesn't make much sense. And because it's such a large amount, and it, it really questions the purpose of doing it.
This idea of doing things that maybe have no purpose.
Yeah, that's one of the characters, or one of the purpose of my work is try to explore or to search of the meaning why we are doing it, and yeah, that's always the question.
Can you talk about this project? You're leaving on Saturday to go to Barcelona for a brand new project.
Yes, in Barcelona, I'm working with Miss Vandelus Pavilion there, and it's an architecture piece did by Miss in 1926 or and it's German pavilion, and each year they have one or two artists or architects working on it, and so this the next week I will have a work done in there.
And what will the piece be?
Should I see it?
You don't have to say, but the press release is already out.
Well, it's just a simple work. I relate to the architecture and relate my understanding of so-called early contemporary and modern architectures, and how it would relate to our common life and our everyday understanding of our life.
Oh, okay. You don't have to say. That's fine. Can I say?
Yeah.
You're filling two pools on the site, one with milk and one with coffee.
It's true.
Are you worried what happens when the milk goes sour?
It'll become a sour milk.
And I heard you were just in Japan hanging out with Comme des Garçons. Are we going to see an eye? I mean, this is one specific example, but do you ever think of expanding to do design to kind of? I mean, there was an element of this when you did Fairy Tale, of designing all the objects for the people, these 1,000 people who went to participate. I think you used a line about designing their lives, right? Designing all the elements of their lives. Do you ever think of, especially it's the 90th anniversary of the Bauhaus, I mean, do you ever think of moving in these directions?
Yeah, I always have temptations in every different field. Think about I started from 10 years old. I already want to become a doctor, and then one day I decided to become a shipper, and which is a very different profession. But I always try to imagine myself as in very different circumstance, and of course, design is very attractive. It's related to our human behaving, and it's very interesting. So I might be involved with more.
I mean, one thing you said once was that how part of your admiration for Chinese culture was because in the past people had come up with design solutions to almost every everyday problem that one would face.
It's true, but the Chinese tradition are completely disappeared or ruined. There's nothing we can say in a proper or clear definition in today's Chinese culture. No matter how big the question is, or how important the question is, you never can come out with any clear definition.
So you don't see, do you see a direct link between the thousands of years of Chinese tradition and the sort of situation today, aesthetically?
I often think, today's Chinese has nothing to do with Chinese even just 100 years ago, or not to mention 1,000 years ago.
So, which is why you have decided to kind of push people in these different directions. I mean, I'm thinking of like this piece you did in Japan with the carpenters, where you made this cube that had just this slightly bumpy surface, right? It's incredible amount of craftsmanship and attention to detail required that only these few people have, but they are only practicing it to kind of produce these fake Ming and Qing chairs out of this very nice wood. Yeah. You call them up on the phone and they do whatever you tell them.
Yes, and now I'm busy in Twittering. I don't even call them on the phone, so they just do whatever they like to do.
The carpenters are on Twitter.
Yeah, I work in very different fashions. Yeah, it's sometimes you have to really trying to achieve something, and you have to work very hard to go through all the details. It turn out will not work, but sometimes you just let some other guys to handle it. It always bring me some surprise, and sometimes I getting a better result. So.
I mean, I guess production-wise, it's interesting because it's not like a factory model. It's not like all these people are in your studio every day. They're kind of, you can call the ceramics guy, you can call the carpenter, you can call the lighting technician, you can call, I don't know, you have different networks you draw on when you make these works. I mean, how does this, process-wise, I think people are sort of interested, or now this new project you're doing with the Zodiac fountain.
Well, it's the process. Of course, you want to have some kind of structure, but at the same time, your method is against the structure. You want control, but at the same time, you want it out of control. You want the quality which can surprise you. You want the sense can bring still to stimulate your curiosity and to lead you to somewhere you've never been before, and you don't really know it. So that is basically the way I work with my colleagues, and also with my conditions in China.
Conditions that so. Maybe this is a good time to open this up a little bit and see if there are people who want to ask other questions. Maybe we should give her a microphone.
I couldn't hear.
The question was whether art students and artists in China are informed about the situation globally, if they have access to information about specific artists.
Any information on contemporary artists?
Well, China is different. We had 30 years ago, we just we were a society like Northern Korean today, and but after the open up, and we have especially the recent years with the internet. I think China is the students there are very alert about maybe it's too alert about what's happening in the West, and but still, but knowing it is not exactly to see it or to know what's happening is not exactly to understand it, because my example is 1979. I had a friend, a translator, gave me several books on Western art, which is first books existed in China about Western art. Some post-impressionist, like Van Gogh or Gauguin's work and Manet's work. But also I got a book of Jasper Johns, and everybody loved the Impressionist, and I don't know what to do with this Jasper Johns. This black, blue, and blue, white, and yellow things. So I just throw it away. Nobody liked it, a book. So yes, you can have the the works there, but the information, but you may never understand it because you're really living in a completely different kind of society. But many works are created by misunderstanding, and that also has certain values. We can see from the how Chinese art sells in the West. That's all created by misunderstandings. Thank you.
I read an article, I believe it was in The Economist, stating that in the 90s, Chinese contemporary artists were creating contemporary art that Westerners thought was the Chinese view of contemporary art. And it wasn't, in this writer's view, coming from China itself, but coming from what the Chinese felt Westerners wanted from China in the early 90s.
Mal with the Coke can art.
Yeah, answer.
What do you think about it? You were involved in the 90s with a group of artists who were making art other than that. I mean, people like in the East Village.
In the 90s, I think first art selected by some Hong Kong dealers, and which they think Hong Kong is a very colonial place, so they think they know the Western taste, and they cook Chinese food in the Western style. I mean, this is very much acceptable by for the people never had Chinese food. But also there's another trend. It's in every region there's an artist who is doing experimental works, and is doing the works more reflects the condition of the region. But it's really never getting popular, because the people who spend money or buying or trying to spend a week in China and in artist studio, they would never have time to see something which they are not familiar with. They only pick up the work. They think, oh, that one remind me Warhol, or So that's really. I think that kind of taste really formed by early people who come to China.
Mr.
I have a
Weiwei.
question here.
Mr. Weiwei. Hello?
I would like to ask you a question about here. About a piece you did for the Documenta, where you brought to Kassel. I don't know, remember what, 1,000 or eventually it was 100 Chinese people to Kassel. I think one of the elements of the work was to see the reaction of that import of people just right in the middle of Germany. What has been the follow-up or the conclusion or the lessons you had from that piece eventually? And also maybe opening up to, we've talked a lot about China. What is your view after living so much in the Western side of the world as well about how the Western world is and whether everything's good or bad?
Yeah, I think this is it's going to be a long discussion, so we will have lunch here or something like that. But yes, I had a work for the Documenta. I brought 1,001 Chinese to Kassel, and which is the work make me very popular in Germany, and people start to discuss why and how it's possible, and it's also people going to go back to China or a lot of issues there. But for me, I think I made a decision not to present, some sculptures or paintings in Documenta, but really have a test. And so I used the internet to find those people who is from a very different background with completely no experience in the West. And some are from mountain areas of some kind of minorities, the women who doesn't even have name before they start to apply for passport. So, and it's a amazing experience for the people who participated, and also it's a set up a condition, a structure for the West, the culture event or industry, and the very primitive Chinese from the various professions to meet and to see what is alike and in the other people's mind and or in their perspective. So this work, of course, is no ending. Those experience would affect their life, and it's a very special project for me, and I only answer half of your question because the other half is going to be too long.
Later, if we want at the end.
Mr. Weiwei, we know the reasons why you returned to China, and much of your work is wrapped up in the situation and concerns of China. Had you not gone back to China because you had made your life outside for a while, how do you think your art would have evolved?
Well, I don't know if it's hard to really look back to this is really, it's more difficult to think about what would happen in that circumstance. It's like predict your future is just same. So I may not be an artist. I may not. I'm for sure. Will not be well known in the art profession. Maybe in some other fields. So.
I just want to say thank you from everybody in the world that you do your political art. I appreciate it.
Well, my art may be political, but I never think I do political art, and yeah. Thank you.
It can be suggested that the avant-garde is dead in the West and that there's a bona fide avant-garde emerging in China. Would you agree with that?
I think we are in completely different kind of society and time. So the idea of avant-garde, it's dead. I think it's art is not for a special elite or a group of people who understand the language, but rather to have much broader opportunities and the chance for anybody to become a real life and thinking process. So I really feel today we are in very completely different world.
I have a question that. Would you like to go ahead? All right. I have a question that really has to do with the whole idea of globalism in relationship to your work. One of the definitions of globalism has to do with the fact that we've become more of an international community. At the same time, the parochialism and regionalism becomes more enhanced. In relationship to my question, I also want to bring up the whole idea of the transactional group of Pierre Huyghe, Rirke Tirvanice, and other artists who felt that they could establish community through their work. And it seems to me with the Documenta piece that you created, you were dealing much more with the issues of globalism in terms of the polarization between international and regional than trying to develop any sense of community. So that the different perspectives are actually exacerbated as people went through Documenta and thought about how the regional Chinese would approach the work as opposed to the international visitors, such as the group here today. Was this at all consideration in terms of your work?
Of course, globalization is an issue nobody can escape with. I don't think it's by choice, but by its necessity. I mean, today nobody can really talk about so-called original and the neighborhood, and without to really define what it's about, and. I think we will always have a neighborhood or so-called original, but it always changes, through the history of time, and especially through today's change. I think we will give a new definition to all the concept we had in the history. Even we feel very secure about, but still we suddenly realize it's completely new, and it's not something we can just easily relate to the old understanding. And
but he's also saying, was that a way of emphasizing like this side of things as opposed to the connections that emerged between the people, among the people in your groups? It's interesting because a lot of the people who went on Documenta on Fairy Tale are still having dinner together every few months or something like this.
Yes, those people who knows nothing about each other, they set up because they had the same experience, and which is very unique, and which they cannot almost share with other people who doesn't have the experience. So they become a community. They start, they have their internet. So-called in Chinese called QQ groups. They have daily contact with each other and share what they're doing today, and their perspective on art and the culture.
It's creating a collective in a strange way.
I'm referring to the previous answer. Do you really believe that contemporary art is like the art that we see here at the fair is for everybody, that everybody can understand it?
I think contemporary art is not, you're talking about the product of our art. It's not exactly what we're talking about contemporary art activities. Of course, it relates to much broader activities. We have movies, designs. Also communication in the internet, and it affect every aspect of our life. What we see in the art fairs, it's part of the contemporary activity. It's collectibles.
Is anyone else have a question? Yeah, I mean, I guess a nice place to end might be with the second half of that other gentleman's question, which is also has to do with an editorial that you wrote for Newsweek just a couple of weeks ago when Obama was on his way over to China. And I think you wrote something like, I'll tell you what you wrote. I have it here. 1 second. Just
I wrote, because Obama is shy, he's not such a nice boy, so he's shy. He's talking about, we're not talking about human rights this time. He's act as more as a salesperson to sell those. Something can change the weather, the protection of the
Climate change.
environment. And we had before he come, this wife of Clinton also was there, and this guy, this lady, Shapiro.
Hillary?
Shapiro. Nancy Shapiro was there. They all suddenly become so nice, They try to not to mention the words human rights, It's such a dirty words now. And they try to please Chinese government. They want, of course, they want to sell something. I understand, but they don't have to behave that way. And Chinese people saying they are so funny. The Americans, they even change their image. They don't uphold their values anymore. So because we all understand we have a economic hardship, but it doesn't have to work that way. So yeah, that's what I wrote something in the Newsweek. I said,
You said, what does it matter if China's economy grows when there are no basic protections for its citizens? Obama must be clear about the West's values of freedom and human dignity. And so I guess it's just, do you believe in the West's values of freedom, or do you believe that the West believes in its own values of freedom and human dignity?
Well, it's not property of the West or East. It's property of our human struggle. It's a long history of so many people sacrifice and choose this to be a more civilized way. And I don't think the West should come as somebody who has mercy or but they should be clear, they are benefited by that, and that created so-called civilization and prosperation of today's life in the West. So I think every deal they make with Chinese government, and which somehow they have the responsibility to state what's is right or what is wrong. This is very essential. It's not you cannot just say today we're not going to talk about it. This is absolutely I cannot believe it.
So maybe just one last question, which is, what would you want to say to the Chinese spies who are sitting in the audience today?
Well, it's. I think their time is past. It's not today. We can openly discuss anything. We can really state our mind clearly. We don't have to have those kind of old tricks. But unfortunately, also those kind of old tricks are still beloved by those old structures and the people who doesn't want to give up.
Thanks a lot, Weiwei, for this.